Welcome to the Bear Cave. We are going to be discussing the Chicago Bears' next head coaching candidates. The Bears did something that they have never done before in history and fired a head coach midseason. I was a little bit surprised they did it, especially once they trotted him out there for the press conference where he said he was pretty confident that he would be coaching the San Francisco game. So, Dobbs, I say before we move into the candidates, let's just kind of discuss how we got here. Eberflus was brought in as a coach to be a part of the rebuild that Ryan Poles started. They were hired together. Flus was interviewed before Poles was hired, and then Poles was given like three choices in head coach, so he picked Eberflus. And, first year you kind of knew that it was going to be a shit show, right? Like they tore the roster down. Second year, they were competitive at the end of the year. The defense was playing lights out, but you knew that you were moving on to a new quarterback. And, the team had talked about the fact that they wanted to break the cycle. Ryan Poles said that, keeping a rookie quarterback with a lame duck head coach. And they did it again. They didn't break the cycle. They actually, I guess technically they broke the cycle because they did fire a head coach midseason. But everyone pretty much knew that Matt Eberflus was not going to be the right guy to win them football games. I mean, his record in one-score games is just atrocious. It's very, very bad. And especially when you're in a division with Dan Campbell, Matt LaFleur, and Kevin O'Connell, you're consistently getting outcoached in division games, and you have 6 of those a year. So that is kind of where we're at. The players basically revolted after the Detroit game. There was a lot of hecticness in the locker room after that game. So, Dobbs, kind of from an outside perspective, how do you view the Bears as an organization? I know you're local to Chicago, but more of a Saints fan. How do you view the fact that the Bears keep making the same mistake over and over again?
Well, again, there's so many ways to look at it, right? I think to your point, look, and this is the thing. Look, before I'm excited, we're happy, ecstatic to be covering the Bears now. It's gonna be tons of fun. We're here, like you said, we're here locally. This is our city. The team, the city's team. So before we even get anything else, it's gonna be a lot of fun to cover the Bears. Looking forward to it, and we got a lot of fun things ahead here. But from the outside looking into your point, what I would start with is, for a long time, right, prior to Tom Benson's passing and from the Saints side of things, I saw a really well-run organization, right? Like how things are going to be, how things should be done top to bottom, how things should be orchestrated off of the field, and how transitions should be made, right? And I think the biggest problem is, to your point, I kind of want to go back to like where we started in. And again, it still rubs me very much the wrong way to this day. And I am still concerned very much. And I think every Bears fan will relate to the fact that as much as I am confident that whoever they hire next is going to be so much better than Flus, and I do think that they probably will get this hire right. There's so much pressure to get the hire right that it's like, if they can't mess this one up, right? And we've said that before, but it's almost like they really can't mess this one up, especially with Caleb in the building, which we're going to get into shortly. But the thing is every Bears fan, I think, is on the same page, right? Worrying about the way the team is run from the top down is still a real thing. And to me, the fact that Flus still got to have that press conference the next day is deeply concerning, right? Because to your point, locker room revolting, everybody else, and we talked about this weeks ago, right? We were saying that you could see very clearly that the Bears were one of the teams, and you can see it when a team has done it. Some teams don't care because they're fully on the tank for a new, right? That it's fully over. They have nothing to play for. They have no quarterback in play, so it's different. But for the Bears, we always talk about how you can still salvage. Yeah, the Bears aren't going to make the playoffs at this point, barring the most miraculous sequence of events ever. But you want to turn it around for the fact of that you have a lot of good guys in the building that you want to keep here long term. You don't want morale to tank, right? And we talked about this a lot. So to me, it was very clear, like, well, there was no doubt, like Flus for sure had to be gone. And the fact that there was even conversation in place about keeping him the rest of the year, to me, is deeply troubling, because we see with our own eyes, Bears fans saw that this is a team that had very clearly quit on their head coach. And to the credit, look, it wasn't a full quit, right? Like, to their credit, they still were going out there playing, and they almost won some really, really big games, what would have been big games. But it hits a point where, again, you try. This was the final straw, and it was crystal clear to everybody, apparently, besides the organization. And I understand from, the press conference today with Warren and Poles, they talked about relationships you develop with these guys. But here's the thing, and we talk about this all the time too, Hunter, this is a business. And relationships, as much as they have a place in it, the relationships could never be the reason that you don't make a decision or you don't move quickly on something. You have to be someone who's willing to make a split-second decision, understanding that, relationships are in place, but it runs deeper than the relationships because you have 53 other relationships that you got to maintain on top of the staff that's managing these 53 players.
I think the biggest thing, too, is the reality is ownership. It's ownership, right? Like, from what I've heard, is Poles wanted Flus gone after the Patriots game, which probably would have been the right first game to fire him, right? I mean, honestly, how he handled the Hail Mary situation could have got him fired as well. But if you're looking for a early out point, like a point where everyone probably would have been on board, is probably the Patriots game. And, I think right before we get into kind of our head coaching candidates, is the reality is ownership was scared to make a decision. This is something that they have not done, and I have to applaud them for actually making the right decision at this point, because we want the Bears to change. We want them to be winners. We want them to succeed. But they did technically break the cycle. Like, they've never fired a head coach. And do I think it took a long time to do? Yes, but at the same time, they did it. And they got the quarterback right. They fired a head coach midseason. They got the quarterback right as it looks right now. And now, what Kevin Warren said in his press conference is the fact of, you don't want to say a decision is going to impact the franchise for the next 10 to 15 to 20 years. But the reality is, this head coaching hire very well could do that. So, without saying any more, let's move into our first candidate, and I think he's the easiest one to start off with, Thomas Brown, who is the interim head coach for the Chicago Bears. He won a Super Bowl with the Los Angeles Rams as the assistant head coach. He was a running back at Georgia, and if you can see, he had a lot of stops as a coach, right? He coached under Matt Eberflus, Sean McVay, Frank Reich, and he's been kind of thrust into some very tough positions before. He was with Carolina when Frank Reich, was play calling, and then he wasn't play calling, and then he took it back. Like, Thomas Brown was the guy calling plays when Frank Reich was not. And then you get here where he takes over from Shane Waldron, and you could see that the offense looks completely different. Now, I will say this. The offense does look better, but they haven't had a route yet, Like, they haven't gone crazy yet. And while they have been playing tougher opponents and they have kept games close, we still saw the slow start with Green Bay not Green Bay, Detroit. Well, I think all of the games, honestly. I think the biggest thing for me is he very well could be the next Bears head coach if he plays well over these next 5 games. And I would really hope he works out, because this is a tough decision for the Bears, because if you hire him, he doesn't work out, then everyone can say, well, yeah, interim head coaches never work out. But you don't hire him, you hire another guy, and at the end of the day, if he goes off and becomes a successful head coach, then you're like, you had this guy in your building. How did you not see this? Now, I think the biggest thing is he's an offensive coordinator, right? And now he's an interim head coach. He's had 2 promotions in 2 weeks. You have to now take on a ton of responsibilities. Like, you are running the program. But it seems like there is universal buy-in. And I want to see how Eric Washington's defense plays under Thomas Brown, because that was the defensive coordinator who's now going to be calling plays because Flus was calling plays. I think that this is a great audition for him. I don't want to put a ton of stock into how these games play out. Like, as long as they're not disasters, like, if they have a game where they completely rout a team, I don't think we should be calling for oh, he has to be the next head coach. Like, they need to exhaust every option in their interviews and then say, did Thomas Brown truly capture the room better than all of these other guys will? Because this guy already has rapport with Caleb. And if they don't hire him as the head coach, he's probably going to be an offensive coordinator or a head coach somewhere else. And then Caleb's going to be on his third play caller. And I'm not saying that's the only reason you should keep him. But the reality is, like, this guy's here now and he can make waves by doing things correctly this year. And you get to see him in-house compared to all these other candidates that you don't have. What would you think? What would your opinion be on bringing in Thomas Brown to be the head coach next year?
Well, look, I'll say this, Hunter, right off the bat. For the first 2 games you could have, right, as the interim OC, and we'll go back to that in a second. Right, it's about impressive as you could get, right? Putting up 27 points against the Vikings, 20 against the Lions, but a very impressive second half. Again, especially for the way they started, and you want it finishing strong, very impressive, right? For 2 teams that are incredibly competitive, that are 2 highly touted playoff teams right now, that's amazing. I will say this, because this is kind of where I think that my head is at, and I understand where a lot of people will disagree with this, but let me wrap it around here and try to sell my point. Again, look, like you were saying, he's gotten 2 promotions, right, over the last 2 weeks. And so he wasn't even the offensive coordinator for till recent. Now all of a sudden you're the head coach. I think what's so interesting about that is, and look, let's call it for what it is, because like Kevin Warren said today in the press conference, I think you can say that, and again, I'm not going to jump and say that it's going to be the most coveted, because I think that would just be, I'm not going to say, because everybody looks at things differently. Yeah, I think yes, things. I think we have to consider that what's desirable for someone else might not be the most desirable for another person, and that's just inherently how life works. I think it'll be very desirable for a lot of people. I can see how some coaches might find other situations be more desirable. Now, here's the point of what I'm trying to say, right? To wrap up this into one big thing, the fact that he's gotten the 2 promotions in such a short period of time. Let's say that he has a good stint, but not good enough to be a head coach for the Bears. Also, not good enough to go be head coach anywhere else. I do think there's a somewhat realistic chance that if you're the Bears, you can get him to reason and level with you guys and say, look, we really appreciate what you did. You had to take on huge responsibility. And if he doesn't get anywhere else to go be a head coach, you say, look, I would love to bring you back as still what really is a promotion and give you the offensive coordinator job, give you a raise. You get to work with Caleb Williams. You know that we have a good path going forward where we actually have a really good plan for success. Would you be willing to, even though it's technically a demotion, it's really still a promotion at the end of the day, given the circumstances of what he walked into at the beginning of the year? So it's a weird situation where I think that, to me, if you're willing to give him a big enough raise from what he was already getting paid for the jump and what he would want going forward, I think that given how much of a crazy year it's been for him, that it's still possibly on the table if, again, that would be if he gets to no interviews somewhere else, if he knows that he's not going to get the job somewhere else. It would have to be something you'd have to really, right? You have to throw the reel out and kind of toy with it for a while. You wouldn't be able to just make that decision quickly. Neither would he. Again, I just think it's on the table potentially.
Yeah, I think my biggest thing, Dobbs, is I don't think that he would come back because it was kind of like a similar situation. Like, I don't know if you had read into the issue with Shane Waldron and Chris Morgan. So Chris Morgan, obviously the offensive line coach. Shane Waldron basically scrapped 2 years of his run game and wanted to do, what Shane Waldron wanted to do. And my issue with that is the issue with keeping Thomas Brown, if you bring in another guy, is you kind of made people keep an existing staff. Like, you kept a run game coordinator from the previous 2 hires, and then you kept a run game coordinator from the previous 2 hires and then brought in a new OC, and the OC didn't like what you were doing, right? So he's like, oh, I'm not going to do that. So I think that if you're going to bring in a new guy, you have to clean house. Like, maybe if you brought in a guy like Mike Vrabel, you can keep Thomas Brown, but I think Thomas Brown has bigger aspirations than being an offensive coordinator. So I think my thing with that is, okay, let's say you have Mike Vrabel in, and we'll get to him because he's one of the candidates, and you keep Thomas Brown. Thomas Brown has another good year with Caleb after, let's say he puts on a decent year with Caleb these last 5 games. Then you're looking for another offensive coordinator again. And unfortunately, that's just the road. So to kind of wrap things up on Thomas Brown, if he can really impress and really buy and get the room to buy in, which I think they already have because he's kind of a no bullshit guy. I mean, I think winning that Super Bowl, being the assistant head coach with the Rams does speak a lot. And I think he is, a bright young mind. It's possible he could be the guy that, we have going forward, but this is one of the more risky hires in my opinion, because it's like, you should know interim head coaches don't work, but he's not the typical interim head coach, He's really not. So I don't know. But moving in to our next one, the big fish that everyone wants to talk about, we have Ben Johnson, right? So Ben Johnson, and I had unknown for Thomas Brown because I kind of grouped these guys into offensive guru, he's an offensive play caller compared to leader of men or those type of things, right? So Ben Johnson, he's been with the Detroit Lions for quite a while, actually. He was there with Matt Patricia, but Dan Campbell actually kept him on. And I will say the big thing about Ben Johnson is he worked under Adam Gase, Matt Patricia, Joe Philbin. He kind of architected, that's the wrong word. He kind of created his offense from the ground up, right? He was in Miami. He coached at Boston College. So all 3 years that he's been his OC, his offense has been pretty good. If you look at EPA per play, it's all been top 5. The only time that his offense was in the double digits was his run yards per game in 2022. But, as they get better running backs, as they've built that O-line, Ben Johnson's offense has been top 5, top 10 for the last 3 years. And I think the biggest thing that you notice about these hot head coach or offensive coordinator candidates is you look at Bobby Slovic, right? And yes, their offensive line hasn't been playing up to snuff, but the idea is he had one great year. They kind of figured his offense out, and I don't think he's going to get a head coach interview this year. If you look at Ben Johnson, he has been consistently dominating the league. Now, I do think Matt Eberflus slowed him down a little bit, and I didn't like that play call where they had Penei Sewell about to throw the ball. I thought it was a horrible play call. But
that was hilarious objectively, though, at the same time.
It was funny, but at the same time, he has the balls to do it. But the main issue with Ben Johnson is you don't know if he can coach a team. You don't know if he can lead a locker room. And we won't know that because Dan Campbell is the front figure in Detroit. I think Ben Johnson, I wouldn't have an issue with getting Ben Johnson, and here's why. Because I have an issue when the Bears decide they're going to galaxy brain something and say, imagine if the Bears had the number 1 overall pick and they're like, no, we're going to trade back and draft Bo Nix. It's do the consensus thing. Because even if the consensus thing doesn't work out, well, at least you did what everyone else thought was probably going to be right. There's a lot of times where the Bears think they're smarter than everybody, and it ends up biting them in the ass later. Whereas, if they got Ben Johnson, it didn't work out, whatever. He was the most coveted head coach in the cycle, right? I still think last year they should have went out and got John Harbaugh. I think that was the answer. But at the end of the day, Ben Johnson, I wouldn't be upset if they went out and hired him if he wanted to come here.
No, 100%. I think, look, and to your point of how he's always been consistent, the man had Jamal Williams break Barry Sanders' franchise single season touchdown record. That's a damn impressive stat in itself. No disrespect to Jamal Williams. Got some love for the man. I think he's awesome. But you guys get what I'm saying. I don't have to even elaborate on what I'm trying to say. The point is that's very impressive. Ben Johnson's offense is very impressive. But now to the point of the elephant in the room, which you already addressed, and I've been on this for a while, and this is a thing we talk about every year in head coaching cycles. Sometimes it comes to fruition, sometimes it doesn't. But the bottom line is that running one room is so different than having to take on the responsibility of every single room. And we see this all the time where, and I think you could even, I guess, and again, it's an interim situation, so it's much different, but you could very much compare it to how the Jets defense went from being a stellar unit when Ulbrich only had to worry about the defense to then, all of a sudden, and Jets are dumpster fire. It's objectively just different. But you get what I'm saying, where you got to take on every responsibility. Yeah, you have less time with your guys one-on-one. All of a sudden, you might lose productivity in that one room you were so dominant in. I will say this, though, because this is something we can all agree on. What I think makes Ben Johnson a little bit different, and just 100% different than every other offensive coordinator in the league, is that you can look at him every single week and truly say, this guy really is an innovator. On top of the fact that he's very young, where he's doing new stuff every single week. He's doing stuff that truly we really have only seen the Kansas City Chiefs have the balls to do. Dare I say he even does the stuff more often, right? He even gets more ballsy than the Chiefs do. So it's really like you looking and you're saying Andy Reid and Ben Johnson are the two most creative offensive minds in football at this point. It's really what I think it's to the point that I'm willing to say that. So I think what you could say is that, yeah, you have a lot of confidence, at least that you have a guy who's constantly evolving and who is still so young. But to the point of, like some other guys we're going to discuss here going forward, you know for a fact that they can lead the locker room. And I'll even compare it to this. I think this is kind of a good thing that everybody would agree on too. I'll use Mike McDaniel as an example because he's kind of been on the hot seat recently with things going on over there in Miami, right? Like we love his offense. His offense is awesome, but do we think that he is necessarily the leader of men you need to be a caliber of to go win the Super Bowl? Because another thing we always talk about is that just being a good team doesn't mean anything. You know, the team that finishes second in the Super Bowl, the losers of the Super Bowl, to us, and this might not be a casual fan agreement, but you and me feel the same about this, where if you lose the Super Bowl, you're the same as the team picking first in the draft, right? Like it's like you lost. You either win, or you're either one of the 32 teams that won, or you lost. And can you be the guy that's going to take us to be the top of the 32 teams? That's a question we for sure don't know about Ben Johnson yet. We know he has an awesome offense. We know that that's probably not going to change. Is he the leader of men that he needs to be to take the Bears to the promised land? Well, I guess that's something we'll only know if the Bears decide to throw the blank check in his face, because that's another thing on top of it. The Bears, as we know, notoriously sometimes get a little penny pinching with the coaching with this type of personnel. So they're going to need to be the top bidders. That's another kind of cherry on top of the sundae, is that they're going to have to blank check the man and put some faith into him. We won't know unless it happens.
I think that they realize that they have the quarterback now. And kind of like Joe Burrow, like they'll go out and spend, right? Now, I don't think I like Zach Taylor. I think he has some shortcomings that has caused some rifts in Cincinnati. But it felt like once they got Joe Burrow, they saw they were real contenders. They started spending. And I feel like the Bears might do that too. One of the things I see with Ben Johnson people talk about is, oh, yeah, it's easy to call plays when you have like the best O-line in football. I agree with that. I understand what people are saying. But don't you think that if they're able to get Ben Johnson, he won't say something like, hey, we need to invest heavily in the offensive line. Like, don't you think he could be a proponent of advocating for that? I do think that is something, and I do think that the Bears are going to really go trench deep in the draft this year. Unfortunately, I don't think Trey Smith is going to be a free agent for the Bears to go get this year. I think the Chiefs are going to find a way to restructure and extend him. But with that being said, I do think Ben Johnson could be a proponent of advocating for the trenches, and that could be an underrated part of bringing him here. And not to say that the Bears wouldn't do it without him being here, but it's just something that we can think about, right? Like, just because he has a great offensive line here in Detroit doesn't mean he wouldn't want that here, right? Like, and you do have Darnell Wright. Braxton Jones has played okay. Like, you do need to improve the interior, but you have a couple pieces there, right? So, unless you have anything else, I'm ready to move on to our next candidate. You good, Dobbs?
No, I was going to say, if anything, look, no, we'll definitely move on in just 1 second. What I was going to say, too, is, and this is slightly off topic, but on topic, one of those things, you know what I mean? Where, look, and it goes back to Thomas Brown for a second. With Shane Waldron, it was reported, and then this is where I don't even know, I really don't know how he was able to stay as long as he was. Because no wonder the O-line looked so bad under Shane Waldron, where him and Caleb didn't even have step counts on the plays. It was just like, yeah, just drop back. And, like, that's like something, no, like, and I'm not even exaggerating. Well, it is. And that's something that and again, you guys know I'm not exaggerating. That's something you wouldn't even see it at a high school level. Like at high school level, there would be like, yeah, it's a 3-step drop, it's a 5-step drop, it's a 7-step drop, certain situations, right? Like if we have an offensive coordinator that was getting paid professional dollars to not do that, well, Hunter, no wonder that the O-line didn't look good. I really don't know what O-lineman could look good when they're not going to be in any type of rhythm with their quarterback. I don't think it's a coincidence that the past, 2-3 weeks to have looked so much better, because now all of a sudden, even with just short-term practice of time of it, they're in sync. So go figure. To the point, what I'm really trying to say is I think the Bears O-line actually, and hand up again, I was wrong. Look, the Bears O-line's a lot better than I thought it was. Even Coleman Shelton's looked a lot better. It's again, I to the point of, look, I'm not for sure sold on anybody on the interior being the long-term solution, but at this point, I'm kind of willing to say, look, Braxton Jones, Darnell Wright, I see no reason you have to go replace them this offseason. But I do think that you're going to, I'm going heavy on I still am going heavy on the trenches regardless, defense and offense. But I think there's a little bit less to address than we perhaps thought now that, go figure, one of the most quintessential parts of offensive football is being applied to the game for the Bears.
The last part I'll say is like, Coleman Shelton actually has not been horrible once they got the O-line blocking figured out. Like, a lot of people were saying like, oh, he's horrible. Like, later in the year, like, Coleman Shelton has not been the weak point of that line. It has definitely been the left and right guard spot. And we'll get into it for another video, but I don't know if you can bring Tevin Jenkins back, unfortunately. Moving in to our next candidate, we have Mike Vrabel. He would be another one of my like favorite candidates for the Bears. I think he struggled at times in Tennessee. And if you look at, kind of his offensive ranks and defensive ranks that I have on the screen, it wasn't anything crazy any year. He did go to the AFC Championship. He had 5 playoff games. He won 2 of them. I didn't really include those stats for, the offensive coordinators because they weren't the head coach. But I thought for all the people that have been head coaches, I'd include like accolades. He was a 3-time Super Bowl winner as a player, so we know what it's like to win. He played under Bill Belichick. He was a coach of the year. Like, Mike Vrabel is going to get you to play your hardest, right? And that's what I have kind of like the leader of men. Like, that's the buzzword the Bears are using now. But if they don't go Ben Johnson, Vrabel has to, if my top 3 are Thomas Brown, Ben Johnson, and Mike Vrabel. To me, it has to be one of those 3 guys. Just because Mike Vrabel would be the guy you want to look to if you're like, I need to get this locker room right. I need to build a winning culture. I need to build like strength in this room. Vrabel to me would be that guy where you don't really got to question that. And I don't think that the firing of him with Tennessee is indicative of who he was. I think him and the GM had different visions of how they wanted to build the team, and that's how it was. I mean, I think Vrabel and Ben Johnson both are going to want to go to places where they can win now. I don't think they're looking to get into like a rebuilding situation, and the Bears are not a rebuilding situation at this point.
No, and look, if anything, Hunter, I think Mike Vrabel's for sure, he maybe not the last laugh. He sure as hell has had the first laugh in terms of what we were just saying, how him and Tennessee had different visions. Well, Tennessee's vision right now wasn't looking so bright. Yeah, I was going to say pretty bad vision. And versus, look, now Mike Vrabel's a premier coaching candidate where everyone else was looking and saying, okay, well, we saw what happens when they lost Mike Vrabel. And yes, the roster is significantly different, but albeit Mike Vrabel, and I think we can all agree on this. Titans fans, if they were here, I would agree. Look, I think Mike Vrabel was never working with an elite unit down there. I never looked at the Titans roster. Yeah, like they were above average and they had some really good pieces. No one's going to argue that. But I don't think they were ever working with like were elite, where they were putting all the money in the right spots, super elite trenches. They didn't have that. And they made it work year in and year out. And if anything, you also can point to, and I know it's kind of the thing where we credit Art Smith for this, but look, you could just as much credit Mike Vrabel for completely revitalizing Ryan Tannehill's career for that short time that was a thing. Mike Vrabel and Art Smith had Tannehill playing like at a borderline all-pro second-team level, right? I mean, that's very impressive stuff. So I think, if anything, what I'm trying to say altogether is that Mike Vrabel's for sure the guy I think we could agree on in this cycle that you can say you don't think has maybe the highest ceiling, but you would say he probably is the guy you're most confident in that's not going to bust out and not going to leave you just completely like, what a wasted investment. You at least have faith that if Mike Vrabel comes in, we're surely at least a playoff team. I think that Bears fans could agree on that. Well, maybe not immediately next year, but that would be the expectation. Let's be crystal clear. Like, whoever comes in to coach this team, the expectation is playoffs. Bears fans are tired of, well, we're building, right? Like I think we can agree that the investments that have gone in this team, right? Yeah, like the contracts, like J.E. on the defensive side, Jalen, Tremaine, like we've done it. There's enough building that's taken place. It's time for whoever that comes in. Year one, playoffs are the expectation. I think that, look, Mike Vrabel probably has the highest ceiling for the guy you're very confident in would bring his team to the playoffs for sure next year. Again, maybe not highest ceiling. We talk about guys like Ben Johnson and stuff, but I mean, that's kind of how I feel about Mike Vrabel.
I think one thing too that Bears fans and Vrabel can relate on heavy is they both hate Nate Davis because Vrabel hated Nate Davis.
That is hilarious.
So, he's no longer on the team. Could be enticing for him. I don't know. I think with Vrabel, you know what you're gonna get. Like, you know what the floor is with Vrabel. You know what the ceiling is. Like, he's a defensive consultant for the Cleveland Browns, right? Kind of similar to what Robert Saleh is doing in Green Bay. So I don't know. I do think that if you look year by year at his stats, and the ranks more than stats, none of them really stick out except for like 1 or 2 years. But he was 500 or above in 4 of his 6 seasons, which, Bears fans, like, is that something you want? Would you like to always be relevant, always be in the game? Because I feel like that's what Vrabel will bring you. Now,
finding ways to win.
Yeah, finding ways to win, literally. And I even included his
Something
little
that
challenges
they've
there.
struggled with for a long
above
again,
500 on his challenges.
Right, winners find ways to win. And again, sometimes stats don't tell the whole story. Get back to how the Titans rosters were never necessarily dominant rosters.
That's what I'm saying too. Like, he always made them play better.
Right, Tannehill. Yeah, I know we know Derrick Henry, but again, it's like you got to take situations.
Brown.
Yeah, I mean, again, and that's kind of the whole point. Is how about that even for another thing?
So like they traded
Vrabel's already dealt with maybe what you would call a dysfunctional front office.
That's true.
And we still, again, no Bears fan is told that this front office is all of a sudden right. Oh, we got rid of the biggest issue, maybe, but the biggest issue still might be the whole front office.
So it's like AJ Brown. They got nothing for Derrick Henry. They fired Mike Vrabel. Like, then they signed Calvin Ridley. Like, the Titans organization is like, let me say this. They are well run in terms of, like, they're not like, it's not like a shit show like the Raiders, but they do make questionable decisions at times, right?
While the money spent this offseason.
I still never understood the Vrabel firing, but with that being said, let's move into another candidate who I would actually am intrigued by after doing more research on him. It's Joe Brady, who's the offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills, who we saw, obviously, in a snow game, kind of destroy the San Francisco 49ers, who are obviously very injured, but he coached under Sean Payton. He coached under Matt Rule. He coached under Sean McDermott. And 2 of those 3 are pretty well regarded in the NFL. He was the OC for the Carolina Panthers. He then became the interim OC last year when Ken Dorsey was fired for the Buffalo Bills. He was with the New Orleans Saints. He was at Penn State, William and Mary. And if you look at his production with the Buffalo Bills, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Now, obviously, you have Josh Allen. Like, that helps a ton. But I'm not saying Caleb Williams is Josh Allen, but you're coming into a talented quarterback if you were to come to Chicago. This is somebody that I wouldn't be upset with because he is, I don't know. Like, he's been in that winning organization of the Buffalo Bills. He's been under Sean McDermott. I think this is a little bit more out there than going and getting Ben Johnson because he's probably not as coveted, but this is an option that if the Bears looked at seriously, I wouldn't be too upset with.
Look, I'm going to say this, Hunter. I waited till we got to him to say it, but from my perspective, he would be in my top 3, right, for the Bears of who I think should be the most important. Because again, I know it was just passing game coordinator off, like it was assistant. He wasn't like the head guy, but for what he had the LSU receivers doing in that passing game back with Joe Burrow, like, and that was just the starting point, right? I think how he's evolved, because this is kind of my thing, Hunter, is and I think you would agree, Bills fans would agree even, when they made the switch midseason, what was that, last year from Ken Dorsey, middle of the season, it was, we were kind of like, it feels longer ago than last year, but it was. I think the consensus was that, yeah, like nobody was for sure sold that Ken Dorsey's like an amazing offensive coordinator, but you were kind of saying to yourself, like, I don't know if he's the problem. And like, is Joe Brady going to be the guy that's going to make us all of a sudden, like, for sure, like, oh, this was really the right move. He has left zero doubt. Like what he's done this year, Stephon Diggs leaving, it's kind of like, to compare it to what I think it is very similar to me, and this is what makes it so impressive, is it's like what, the Saints used to be doing with Drew Brees before the Michael Thomas days. right? You never needed to have an amazing receiver talent in the building. It's like what we have, we're going to make work. And I think what's so important about that to me is that then, unlike right now, what we see for the Bears, you don't have to go drop a bunch of capital on skill positions because my stance on this, Hunter. I don't think skill position guys win you world championships in football. I think we've gotten to this really weird point where everybody's, dude, drop all the bags on these guys, 120 million on my skill positions. And me, I'm like, where's the money for the O line? Where's the money for the D line? Where is the money for the lockdown corner? Because you lose that. To me, that's the most important stuff on the football team. And I know it might not be a popular opinion. Do your history, do your research. You will very quickly see that it's the truth. I don't think anything is going to change. So I think a guy like Joe Brady is so quintessential. If he can, look, and again, back to the leader of men thing, we have no clue what Joe Brady would look like as a head coach. But I think that what he's done in the short stint of time from 2019 to the year now we're in 2024, I think you could say, look, it's a very upward trajectory. And if he could be a leader of men, he could be a total dark horse where maybe you don't have to drop anywhere near as much as Ben Johnson. And you might be able to get really similar production out of the guy where maybe he's even a better leader of men. Who knows? So I think it's kind of, to me, it's a very interesting play with Joe Brady, because to me, he'd be in that, right? If I'm making the decisions, I'm like, we're going to get this guy in the building a lot of times, and we're going to really, really see if we think he could be the guy too.
The Joe Brady hire I wouldn't be upset with it, but if it didn't work out, I would be more upset because I'd be like, you again go for the second option, the second offensive option, and it didn't work. Now, he has been calling plays, and I don't like the comparison of Nagy to Ben Johnson or Nagy. I've really seen it for Joe Brady, but Nagy was calling plays for Patrick Mahomes under Andy Reid. Like, it wasn't the same thing, right? Like, Andy Reid still calls the plays there. Ben Johnson's been doing it for 3 years and hasn't been able to be stopped. Joe Brady has been putting on a clinic this year, right? I believe they're the highest scoring team in the NFL right now, or second. Maybe first after last night. But with that being said, I wouldn't mind the Joe Brady hire. I'm very interested to see which of these guys they seriously consider. And I would actually be very interested to see, like, what is the outside opinion of the Bears job from these guys' perspective? Like, is it truly coveted? Like, I think with the talent, yes. The cap space, yes. The picks, yes. But in terms of, like, the organization, like, it would be the coolest thing ever to come into be the Bears, and take the Bears back to glory. Like, that would be amazing. But in terms of, like, the actual structure of Kevin Warren, Ryan Poles, and George McCaskey, that is a questionable thing.
No, especially if you've been a part of dysfunctional organizations before. It's a reality that it has to be considered. And, again, a lot of coaches go through at least one in their life. It's how they get to the points that they're at where they get to good situations. But, again, no, that's the big thing, Hunter. And I think every Bears fan needs to remember that. But I do think that there's enough. It's kind of like if we were to put on a scale, the good stuff really does heavily outweigh the one really glaring big issue.
All right, moving into our next candidate, we have Liam Cohen, who is the OC for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was with Kentucky, the Los Angeles Rams, Kentucky again. Then he was at a bunch of different colleges. Like, I do like Liam Cohen, but he's only really been calling plays for 1 year. And I mean, I know he did it at the college level, and I like what he's doing with Baker. To me, this would be kind of, I don't want to say this would be like a Nagy hire, but it would just be something where it's just like, there's not enough of a proven track record, and you need to know that the guy you're hiring is the right guy. I don't know if there's enough on his report card to definitively say that this is the right guy, right? Like, this is a guy that touched, Sean McVay. So, okay, yeah, he may be, you know what I'm saying? Like, to me, it's just not enough to hire this guy, even though I do like what he's doing this year with Tampa.
100%. I was going to say, look, and my thing is too, what I think my favorite thing about Liam Cohen is that, and Bucs fans, would be on this like wet on rice. The jump that besides Tristan Wirfs, the jump that the O-line has made, right, from last year to this year, it's a humongous jump for a one season period of time. And I know you could say to me, well, Dobbs, that's more on the O-line coach. That's just the fact that they had a young O-line and the guys made the jump. But I do think that you can inherently see that the run game is so much better this year than it was last year. The way they're right, the style in which they run the ball, the way that they have kind of, and I know he's becoming more the bell cow at this point. They kind of were trying to make it more of a a committee at first, but right, Rashad White and Bucky Irving, the way they're producing, like I don't really think. I think it would be unfair to say that he hasn't earned a shot, because I do, and we agree he has earned a shot. I think he's earned an interview. But to your point, I do think that if you, again, back to your kind of thing, like galaxy braining it, if they were to choose Liam Cohen over these other guys, if he didn't want an egregiously less amount of money and they didn't want egregiously just too much money, I do think we would be sitting here saying, and not that it couldn't work out, but I think we would agree, and most Bears fans would agree, that that's not necessarily who you'd want as your number one guy. And especially because, too, and this is kind of, and this might be nitpicky, but look, Baker Mayfield turns the ball over a lot. And not that the offense still hasn't been super productive with that being the case, but like, I think we can all agree, Bears fans would be in a major agreement that the number one priority we want out of the OC coming in is let's make sure that he's going to still keep Caleb, because Caleb has been super impressive with the turnovers, especially recently. Let's make sure we got a guy who keeps it really sound. We're nothing crazy. Yeah, we want him to turn it loose more, obviously. But that's kind of something we're already seeing with Thomas Brown at the helm. Let's make sure we really get a guy that's going to keep the turnovers down, keep the footwork improving. Not that Liam Cohen can't be that guy. I just do think we're looking at Baker Mayfield, and yeah, he does turn it loose maybe one too many times. Maybe they're not disciplined enough on the stuff that I think is very important. And right, yeah, they have a very productive offense, and the defense is really, really not good this year. So you could say they could have more wins if not, and the midterms would be mitigated. But just to me, kind of like you're saying, I just don't think he should be the number one option for obvious reasons and all the reasons we just listed.
I think my biggest thing, too, with the Liam Cohen thing is you could have had him as your OC this year. You could have had Thomas Brown as your OC this year. Like, they interviewed both of these guys, and they didn't hire them. And I think that is, I don't want to say cause for concern with the candidates, but more of, like, the evaluation from the front office's standpoint. Like, you're telling me you chose Shane Waldron over Liam Cohen and Thomas Brown? Like, that's who you chose? So that is my kind of issue with not hiring them already, because we could have already seen what this guy could have done with Caleb. Now, here's my other thing. Maybe if you do that, Flus is still here. And I know at the end of the day, Bears fans didn't want Flus here. So maybe it worked out for the best. That's hard to say. It's really just cope. But at the end of the day, like, we knew Flus was not going to be the guy to win his playoff games, coaching as conservative as he did. So that's kind of my all on Liam Cohen. I would be upset if Liam Cohen was the hire. Not because of Liam Cohen. I just think there's better candidates for the Bears right now.
Yeah, I would be in agreement with you on that 100%.
Let's move into our last candidate, my least favorite candidate for the Bears job, but he's going to be connected to them all offseason because of Caleb and Cliff Kingsbury's history at USC. Cliff Kingsbury, regular season record is under 500. He was over 500 2 out of his 4 years in the NFL. He's 0-1 in the playoffs, 300%, he's 3 for 10 on challenges. He was the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals from 2019 to 2022, and he always has had, like, decent years, right? They were never horrible. I mean, there were some years that were pretty bad, but one thing about Cliff Kingsbury is during the second half of the season, his offense usually gets figured out pretty badly, to the point where you just see a dip in offensive production. Now, we saw the Commanders rout the Tennessee Titans, but both of us are not very high on the Tennessee Titans, on what they are, who they are, how they play. So I don't know if Cliff Kingsbury is a head coach, just like Mike McDaniel. Like, I don't know if he's a head coach. And I would hate for the Bears to bring him in just because they were together for 1 year at USC last year. I don't think Cliff Kingsbury has what it takes right now to be the head coach of the Bears. So I would be pretty upset if they brought him in or he was seriously considered for the job. I think he will get an interview. I don't know if he's actually going to want to go here because, from my understanding, when the Bears had the interview with him, it didn't really seem like a real interview. It just felt like they were trying to get information out of him for Caleb, which I think that is what happened. So I don't know. And I guess my thing is like he wasn't necessarily like the most coveted offensive coordinator. Like the only reason he didn't sign with the Raiders is because they wouldn't add another year on to his contract, and the Commanders were willing to. So, and you know, like the Commanders were that wasn't their first choice anyway. So this would probably, if the Bears went to hire Cliff Kingsbury to be the head coach, it would probably be the most frustrating thing out of all these candidates for me.
Well, no, again, and look, I know right after yesterday, Sunday, it's not, or I guess not, but yeah, yesterday. My thing is, what's so frustrating is I know because now you can say, well, they just had an explosive day, but I think we were talking about this for the past few weeks now. We've seen the trend with Cliff, and it looks like you crystal balled it again, Hunter, where the first half of the season is always explosive. And then it's kind of like the second half of the season, if he can look and if he can put together a few more games like yesterday against better teams, it'll shut me up and maybe this narrative can stop. But against the Titans, I'm not willing to sit here and be all, ecstatic about it. Like, yes, it's impressive no matter who you play because it's the NFL. But at the same time, there's levels to the impressiveness, right? Just subjectively, I think we can agree on that. So there's kind of also a thing that I've been big on where I don't know how many people would agree with this, or some people might find ways to nitpick this argument or disagree with it perhaps. But my thing is, and I've talked about this before, look, Caleb Williams in 2022, right? The Heisman year, unstoppable, unbelievable. And not that he wasn't unbelievable in 2023 also, but look, I think the tape that I saw in 2022 was better than what I saw in 2023 when Cliff was his OC. Like, I think he was better in 2022 when. Well, no, you're right. Actually, that's my thing is, but let me put it like this: before that, Cliff had a bigger role. I think Caleb was playing better football. So you know what I'm saying, and not and again, well, and that's my thing is it's like USC was worse in 2023. They like right less impressive season, just Caleb less accolades. I mean, and again, how are you gonna? I mean, how are you gonna do a Heisman season? But again, I'm just saying when Cliff had more of a hand in what was going on, objectively speaking, USC looked worse. And yes, you could say, okay, they lost some guys, and right, okay, you can play that too. And that's fair. That's why I'm saying that I would understand people who disagree with this sentiment that I'm making. But for me personally, that's how I feel. How I felt is too. Look, Kyler had some amazing seasons with him for the first half, but again, back to the second half thing, there was never like sustained consistency with any of his quarterbacks. I don't think that you want Caleb to be the next Kyler situation where, oh, we look awesome, and then, oh, he's really falling off, and now we have questions about because that's how look, and Cardinals fans know this. There was even points with Cliff where Cardinals fans would get to the point of saying, like, is Kyler the guy? Is it Cliff? Is it Kyler? You don't want to be in that situation as a Bears fan. Because I'm going to tell you this, and I've said this, right? I've been on record multiple times. Caleb is the guy. There's no doubt. Caleb's the most talented prospect I've ever watched in my life coming out of college. Well, Caleb, he's even shown this year short stints of it in the games. It'll be more of a consistent thing as the years go on, as the offense continues to evolve. Now, now that they have step counts in the plays and you actually can be in rhythm, go figure. Super important for quarterback play. But look, jokes aside, there's no doubt. There never should be a doubt. And any Bears fan that was on the whole train, a lot of you guys really you took the bait way too early. There's too many Bears fans that it rubs me the wrong way. They were already out on Caleb. We made the wrong pick. It's really funny now how that looks the past couple weeks. That's why you can't do that. Don't take the bait. You're going to look foolish. But my point is this: Caleb Williams is going to be truly incredible for years to come. Really, and this is what's funny, regardless of whether they get the head coach hire right or wrong, as long as they keep a good offensive mind in the building, Caleb's going to continue to evolve and he's going to continue to be a really good quarterback. But as we can all agree, the thing about that is it's not about whether you develop him for a short period of time. It's about getting things right so you can keep him in the building for the rest of his career, and then he's a Chicago Bear the rest of his career. That's the most important thing, hands down. So, and to me, to wrap it all up here from my point of view, Hunter, I think, and you would agree, Cliff is the guy I have the least amount of faith in. And I know coaches can change. You can go through bad cycles like a Belichick, and then you can completely turn around, and all of a sudden we don't care about those 3 or 4 years where you really had a rough stint. But to your point of how young he is, the leader of men question thing, I think that I would have the least amount of confidence in Cliff versus the other guys.
Yeah. No, I agree. So to kind of wrap things up here, Dobbs, give me your top 3 candidates for the Bears head coach, and I'll give you mine. I already named them, but.
All right. I would say, again, it's, and this is a cop-out, so I won't do it. I would say, if you're asking me straight up, though, I would say Ben Johnson and Mike Vrabel are kind of tied for one. I wouldn't be like, right, I would say I would completely understand either side of that, but I won't do that. I'll say Ben Johnson 1, because, again, the risk outweighs if things don't work out, right? Like, that's one of those situations. 2, Mike Vrabel, because you're very confident in that. 3, where we're going to disagree, that's okay. Joe Brady, because I do think there's massive upside there. And the growth that I've seen over a 5-year period is where I'm saying, kind of like a Sean McVay, right? Where you're, a young Shanahan, you're like, okay, I really can see how that he could lead us to Super Bowl contention within a short period of time.
Okay, so I'm going to take Thomas Brown out right now because Ben Johnson, Vrabel, and Joe Brady would also be my 3, right? I think Thomas Brown, I think they're going to seriously consider him, but
it's just a tough situation to evaluate.
He's the riskiest one strictly because of optics, you know? He really is. Like, he really could be the next great head coach, but if you hire him and don't work out when you have Ben Johnson, when you passed on Jim Harbaugh, I don't know if Jim Harbaugh had interest in coming here, but you know what I'm saying? Like, you hire the interim when you had the chance to go get Ben Johnson or Jim Harbaugh, it's going to look really shitty. And if it doesn't work out, like, I don't know.
I think you would agree with this too, though. And here's the thing. Look, everyone in the Bears front office knows this. To your point, yes, that would be the worst thing optically. But the bottom line is, though, Hunter, like, if they don't get this hire right, it doesn't matter if they do the optically right or wrong thing. It's over for this current front office if they don't get it right, regardless of optics. So I do agree with everything you said about the fact that you really do have to hammer home. But again, this is based off how things finish. If the Bears finish terribly and everything goes to shit over the next 5-6 weeks, well, there won't really be a debate. It's kind of like, okay, that track, right? The tracks are over, right? The train ran off the cliff. It's over. But if things keep going the way they're going, I do think you have to really exercise that route. But albeit everything we said on top of it, look, he would have to really, really do something special in those interviews for the other guys that you're going to be having at the interview table as well.
100%. Thank you guys so much for watching the first episode of The Bear Cave. Let us know in the comments who your favorite head coaching candidate is. Like I said, they just have to get it right. If they get it wrong, this is the first time they're in a position where it's like, if they get it wrong, it's going to really screw up the chances because Caleb is not like a prospect or player that we have seen come across here for a while. I'm going to address one thing real quick before we end it. Bears Junkie 23 Hall of Fame says Kyle Shanahan. If the 49, I am a 49ers hater, but if Kyle Shanahan becomes available, the Bears should literally do anything in their power to make sure that he comes here to be the next head coach. And that is the last thing I'll say on it.
I would agree with that as well. Again, if that becomes because I'm still not sold that that's what they're going to do. I don't think that they're going to can Lynch over there in San Fran, and I don't think they're going to, because that's my thing is, if you don't can Lynch, I see no way Lynch cans Shanny. So it's kind of like it goes hand in hand.
It would be a firing. I think it would be a thing of like, hey, we need to rebuild this. Shanahan doesn't want to be part of a rebuild, and they mutually part ways.
Look, look, if it's on the table, I agree with you. And, again, I don't even had that thought, albeit Chicago's so much more desirable. There's no way he would choose New Orleans. But it's like, as a guy on the record that has said a lot of bad stuff about the Niners and Shanahan, look, jokes aside at that point, if he's available, you got to make a move.
I mean, if you say you would take Eberflus over Kyle Shanahan, you're insane. And that was just the scenario at that point. So thank you guys so much for watching. This is the first episode of The Bear Cave, so we're going to be trying to put out 2 to 3 podcasts kind of a week. Subscribe, leave a like. We'll be back.
If anything important happens also, aside from those 3, it will be addressed.
It'll be addressed. So thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your night.